For centuries, Bram Stoker's Dracula has haunted our nightmares, forever linking a Romanian castle to bloodthirsty vampires. But what if the real story of Vlad the Impaler and his formidable stronghold is a tale of strategic genius, brutal justice, and a history far more compelling than fiction? This isn't about cinematic vampires, it's about the powerful truth behind the myth. Welcome to the Conjuring Files, where we explore the reality behind the legends, the history behind the horror, and the human stories buried beneath the myth. We're stepping into the real castles of Wallachia, not to find a vampire, but to uncover a warrior prince who became one of history's most misunderstood figures. Picture this, a stormy night. Lightning cracks over a jagged silhouette, Bran Castle perched on a Carpathian cliff. The camera pulls back to reveal the same castle in broad daylight, small, tidy, surrounded by tourist buses and souvenir shops. No fangs, no fog, just history. Because here's the truth. Bran Castle was never Dracula's home. In fact, Vlad the Impaler likely visited it only once, if at all. Yet thanks to Hollywood and clever marketing, it's become the official Dracula's castle. Millions flock here, but they miss the real story. To understand the real Vlad, we must go back to his childhood. In 1442, Vlad and his brother Radu were sent as political hostages to the Ottoman court. It was here, in captivity, that Vlad learned the brutal art of psychological warfare and the absolute nature of power. He witnessed the Sultan's absolute authority and the terrifying efficiency of Ottoman punishment. It would define his reign. When he finally returned to Wallachia to claim his throne, he was no longer a boy. He was a man forged in the fires of foreign captivity. He found his homeland in chaos, torn between treacherous nobles and the ever-present threat of Ottoman invasion. Vlad realized that only through absolute terror could he maintain order. Thus began the practice that gave him his name, the Impaler. Impalement wasn't just a punishment, it was a psychological weapon. It was designed to paralyze his enemies with pure, unadulterated fear. In 1462, Mehmed II led a massive Ottoman army toward Wallachia. Vlad, outnumbered, struck under the cover of darkness. The night attack at Târgoviște was a masterclass in guerrilla warfare. Vlad led his men directly into the heart of the Sultan's camp. When the Sultan reached the capital the next morning, he found the forest of the impaled, 20,000 bodies. Even the conqueror of Constantinople turned back. This is Poenari Fortress. This is the real stronghold of Dracula. Built using the labor of his enemies, it was a near-impregnable eagle's nest. According to legend, Vlad forced the treacherous boyars to march to the mountain and build this fortress until their fine clothes fell off their backs. To reach it today, you must climb nearly 1,500 steps. It is a place of absolute isolation, where history still whispers through the ruins. From here, Vlad could monitor the valleys below and escape through secret tunnels if the fortress was ever compromised. It was a fortress of pure strategy. But even the Impaler could not hold out forever. Betrayed by his allies and hunted by the Sultan, Vlad was eventually captured and imprisoned. For 12 years he lived in captivity in Hungary, a former king reduced to a political pawn, but his legend was only just beginning to grow. The first fake news began to spread through German pamphlets. They painted him as a bloodthirsty monster, a devil incarnate. It was 15th century propaganda. In 1476, Vlad made one final attempt to reclaim his throne. He died in battle, his head sent to the Sultan in Constantinople as a trophy. 4 centuries later, Bram Stoker found the name Dracula in a library. He took the name, the ruthlessness, and the location, and created a monster. But Stoker's vampire is a shadow. The real Vlad was a man of flesh and blood, a protector of his people who used terror as his only shield. So when we peel back the fangs and the capes, we find something far more fascinating, a human story of survival, strategy, and brutal justice. Poenari stands as a testament to the real Dracula. It is etched in blood and stone, forgotten by the masses but remembered by history. This is the Conjuring Files. We hope you leave with more than just a legend. We hope you leave with the truth. Until next time. Next time, we journey into the most haunted forest in the world, Hoia Bațiu. Don't forget to subscribe. In Romania today, Vlad is often remembered not as a monster, but as a hero who defended his land against all odds. His legacy is complex. The shadow of Dracula will always haunt Wallachia, but the man behind the shadow is the one who truly changed the world. Would you have been able to stand against the tide? Or would you have become another stake in the forest? History is rarely simple. Beyond the blood and the ruins, Wallachia remains a land of profound beauty, a place where the past is always present. Dracula lives on in our stories, but Vlad the Impaler lives on in our history. One is a nightmare, the other is the truth. Forget the fangs and the capes. The real Dracula was not a supernatural entity, but a 15th century warlord named Vlad III, Prince of Wallachia. His nickname was Țepeș, the Impaler. This is the story of a man whose reality was far more terrifying than any myth. To understand Vlad, you must understand his home. Wallachia was a buffer state, a thin strip of land caught between the massive gears of the Ottoman Empire and the Hungarian kingdom. It was a place of constant war and survival at any cost. This was the crucible that shaped the Impaler. Born in 1431, Vlad was the son of Vlad III Dracula, a member of the Order of the Dragon, a military brotherhood sworn to defend Europe from Ottoman expansion. Dracula meant the dragon, a title of pride. But for young Vlad, this legacy would soon be forged in blood and betrayal. At age 11, Vlad and his brother were handed over to the Ottoman Sultan as political hostages. For 6 years, Vlad lived in the heart of his enemy's empire, witnessing brutal executions and the high cost of weakness. Here, he learned the language of fear, a language he would later use to terrify the world. By 1456, Vlad claimed his throne. His family had been murdered by treacherous nobles known as boyars. Vlad knew that to survive, he could not simply rule, he had to dominate. He stepped onto a throne surrounded by enemies with a singular, chilling vision: absolute, unquestioned order. In 1457, Vlad invited the boyars to an Easter feast. After questioning their loyalty, he had them seized. The older nobles were impaled immediately. The younger were marched into the mountains. This wasn't just revenge, it was a systematic purging of the old order to make way for his absolute rule. Those boyars were forced to build Poenari Fortress, a stronghold perched on a knife-edge cliff. They worked until their fine clothes rotted away and their bodies broke. This fortress became Vlad's true home, a place born of forced labor and designed to be an impregnable eagle's nest overlooking the Argeș River. Impalement became his signature, a slow, agonizing death that served as a psychological weapon. He didn't just kill his enemies, he used their bodies to send a message. He believed that if a leader was feared enough, crime would vanish, and his borders would remain secure from invasion. The ultimate test came in 1462 when Sultan Mehmed II invaded Wallachia with 90,000 men. Vlad, with a far smaller force, turned to guerrilla warfare. He poisoned wells and burned crops, leaving the Ottoman army to march through a scorched wasteland of hunger and disease. On June 17, 1462, Vlad launched his most daring gambit, the night attack. Disguised as Ottomans, his elite soldiers infiltrated the Sultan's camp to assassinate Mehmed. While they failed to kill the Sultan, the chaos was absolute, leaving 15,000 Ottoman soldiers dead in their sleep. When Mehmed reached the capital, he found it abandoned, except for the road lined with 20,000 impaled prisoners. Even the battle-hardened Sultan was shaken, reportedly saying, "I fear no man, but that devil Vlad, I cannot face." The Ottoman army began its retreat. Vlad had won through terror. Following his victory, Vlad was betrayed by his allies and spent 12 years in a Hungarian prison. Even in captivity, his legend grew. Stories whispered of him catching birds and mice in his cell just to impale them on tiny twigs. Whether true or not, the myth of the monster was becoming permanent. Under Vlad, honesty was the law. Legend says a golden cup sat unguarded by a public fountain so travelers could drink. Throughout his entire rule, the cup was never stolen. His people knew the price of theft, and they knew Vlad was always watching. He was their harsh but just protector. Vlad's end came in 1476. Returning to claim his throne for a third time, he was ambushed by Ottoman forces near Bucharest. He died in battle, fighting to the last. Some say he was betrayed by his own soldiers. Others say he was mistaken for the enemy in the fog. His head was sent to the Sultan, but his legend refused to die. Vlad the Impaler never drank blood or slept in a coffin. He was a man who believed brutality was the price for order in a world of chaos. And that reality, the cold, calculating human monster, is far scarier than any vampire Bram Stoker could ever imagine. This was the real Dracula.
When tourists visit Romania, they head to Bran Castle, a fairy tale fortress with turrets, secret passages, and gift shops selling plastic fangs. It's picturesque, it's marketable, but historically, it's a red herring. Bran was built by Teutonic knights in the 1300s as a customs post. Vlad may have passed through it during a campaign, but he never owned it, lived in it, or fortified it. It's Dracula link, pure 20th century marketing. The real Dracula's castle is Poenari Citadel, perched 1,000 feet up a sheer cliff in the Argeș River Valley. To reach it, you climb 1,480 stone steps through forest and mist. No gift shops, no crowds. Just wind, stone, and silence. Vlad rebuilt Poenari in the 1450s as his strategic stronghold. From its heights, he could spot Ottoman armies miles away. Its location was so defensible, legend says his wife leapt to her death from the tower rather than be captured, giving the nearby river its name, Râul Doamnei, the Lady's River. Architecturally, Poenari is raw, functional, military. Bran is ornate, romantic, touristic. One speaks of war, the other of fantasy. Yet 99% of Dracula tours skip Poenari entirely. Why? Because truth doesn't sell as well as myth. A crumbling ruin doesn't photograph like a Disney castle, and a historical warlord doesn't haunt dreams like a vampire. But stand at Poenari at dawn, with the Carpathians stretching below, and you'll feel it. This is where a prince stared down empires. This is where history bled, not in a basement full of fake coffins. Next, how a Romanian warlord became an immortal vampire, and why Bram Stoker never set foot in Romania.
Bram Stoker never visited Romania. He never saw the jagged peaks of the Carpathians or the dark forests of Wallachia. He never stood before the ruins of Poenari. In fact, he barely knew the true history of the man named Vlad. Yet in 1897, he published a novel that would change history, fusing a real name with Eastern European folklore to create the ultimate monster. Stoker found the name Dracula in a library book, an account of the principalities of Wallachia and Moldavia. He liked the name's dark, rhythmic sound. It carried a weight he couldn't ignore. He borrowed Vlad's reputation for cruelty, the tales of stakes and blood. But the rest, it was pure invention. The vampire myth Stoker tapped into was already ancient. It lived in the whispers of village elders long before his pen touched paper. In Slavic and Romanian folklore, strigoi were restless spirits of the dead, sometimes blood drinkers, sometimes just omens of plague. Corpses were staked, decapitated, or buried face down to keep them from rising. Garlic and holy symbols were folk protections. These weren't just stories. They were a way for people to exert control over the terrifying, unexplained mystery of death. Stoker blended these tales with Victorian anxieties. Fear of disease, tuberculosis made victims pale and cough blood. He touched on sexual repression. Lucy's seduction was seen as moral corruption, a fall from grace. And xenophobia, Dracula as the foreign invader, a threat from the East coming to devour the heart of the empire. His count wasn't Vlad. He was a symbol of everything England feared in a rapidly changing world. The novel was a hit, capturing the public's imagination. But its evolution was only just beginning. Then came the films. Bela Lugosi's 1931 performance cemented the cape, the accent, and that haunting, hypnotic stare. Hollywood added the bats, the crumbling castles, and the vampire brides. The legend grew larger than the man. Romania, eager for tourism, eventually embraced the myth, even though Vlad is a national hero there, not a monster. Today, to the rest of the world, Dracula means vampire, not the prince who fought for his people.
And while Bran Castle profits from the fiction, the real seat of Vlad's power, Poenari, slowly crumbles into the earth. Because myth is easier than history, it's cleaner, more entertaining, and far easier to package for a global audience. Fantasy sells better than facts. It always has. But at what cost to the memory of those who lived? The real tragedy isn't the horror story. It's that we forgot the man who defended Europe against overwhelming odds, only to worship a monster who never truly existed outside the pages of a Victorian novel. Next, why the truth matters, and how to see Romania beyond the vampire trap. Join us as we uncover the real Vlad Țepeș. To understand the man, we must look at the 15th century, a time of constant war and impossible choices. The Ottoman Empire was an unstoppable force, expanding deep into Europe. Small principalities like Wallachia stood in their way. Vlad used brutality not as a whim, but as a psychological weapon, a desperate attempt to preserve his people's independence. Beyond the stakes and the blood, he was a ruler who built fortresses, trade routes, and a sense of national identity. His legacy is woven into the very fabric of Romanian culture, a symbol of resistance and iron-willed sovereignty. The vampire trap is a lucrative distraction, but it obscures the rich, complex beauty of a land that is so much more. By examining the records, the letters, and the archaeology, we can finally separate the man from the myth. In the hearts of many, he remains a hero, the impaler, yes, but also the protector, a leader who did what was necessary. So we invite you to look past the fangs, to look past the capes and the shadows of Hollywood fiction. Discover the real Romania. The history is far more compelling than any ghost story ever written. Stay tuned for our next episode where we travel to the real Poenari fortress.
So what's the takeaway? That Dracula isn't real? No. The takeaway is this: the real story is more fascinating. Vlad the Impaler wasn't evil. He was complex, a product of his time, shaped by war, faith, and betrayal. His castles weren't lairs. They were fortresses in a battle for civilization. And Romania isn't just Dracula's homeland. It's a land of Carpathian wolves, painted monasteries, Danube deltas, and resilient people who honor Vlad as a defender, not a demon. If you visit Romania, go to Poenari. Climb the steps. Feel the wind. Imagine a prince watching Ottoman banners rise on the horizon and choosing to fight, not flee. Then visit Bran, not as a vampire fan, but as a student of myth-making. See how stories evolve, how history gets repackaged, how truth becomes tourism.
And remember, the scariest monsters aren't the ones under the bed. They're the ones we invent to avoid facing real history. At the Conjuring Files, we'll keep digging through exorcism records, haunted forests, sleep-death syndromes, and more to separate fact from fear. Because the truth isn't always pretty, but it's always powerful. Bran Castle gets millions of visitors, but Poenari holds the real story. Vlad didn't drink blood, he spilled it to save a nation. The real Dracula wasn't a vampire, he was far more terrifying. Smash that like button if you choose history over Hollywood. Subscribe for more truths behind the terror. Because the truth isn't in the castle basement. It's in the stones, the records, and the courage to look beyond the myth. The truth is in the files.